Welcome to the Speak with People podcast. My name is Jason Raitz. I'll be your host, and this podcast exists to help you improve your communication skills. Whether you communicate one-on-one, to a team, from a stage, or from behind a screen, we know that when we improve our communication skills as leaders, it exponentially changes everything. It improves our relationships, it improves our leadership skills, and it improves our business skills. So let's get ready to dive into this next episode. Well, how would you like to connect the heartbeat of your company to the heartbeat of your customers? Well, according to Steve Multer, no one loves to be sold, but everyone loves a great story. And isn't that the truth? So have you ever wondered why some leaders, some speakers, their stories seem to come to life and some don't? Maybe you've been in that situation where you just wish your stories would come to life a little bit more. And would you like to just tell some passionate stories? Would you have some of that gift? So how do you weave all of those stories together? That's what we're going to talk about today on the Speak with People podcast. I'm just honored and humbled to have an amazing guest with us, Steve Multer. He is a speaker, corporate trainer. He partners with so many organizations. We were just talking offline, and our stories have connected so well. I could just ask him industry questions all day long. But Steve, I am so honored to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Well, that is the warmest welcome ever, Jason. Thank you. It is an honor to be with you, with all of your listeners and your supporters and the leaders that you work with. And I'm just grateful to add my voice to the conversation, deliver whatever value I can, and get to know you through the talk as well. So thank you.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so you're Chicago. I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but are you a Cubs fan or a Sox fan if baseball is in your mix there?
I'm going to break a few hearts here with that first question. I live about 10 minutes from Wrigley Field, and I've been to one ball game in 30 years. That's what a bad fan I am. And what's even worse is one of my dearest friends lives directly below me, 16 steps below me in the same building, has season tickets, invites me all the time, and I always say no. I'm not proud of this. And I do love a good hot dog and a beer with a bunch of friends in the stands, but I don't know, man. It's just not my thing.
It's
We
all
all have our
right.
things. It's not my thing.
It's all right. It's all right. We had so many things in common, and then the baseball moment came up. But hey, we'll get there.
Were you going when you lived in the Chicago area? Did you go to Sox games or Cubs games?
Well, I went to Cubs games because I grew up in the city of Detroit, and Wrigley reminded me of the old Tiger Stadium. So, as a Tigers fan, we hated the Sox, so we stuck with the Cubbies. So.
Northsiders all the way, baby. I will say that we are, my family and I are major fair weather fans. When the Cubs won the World Series, boy,
Of
we were
course.
all in there. It lasted for about a half an hour. It was great.
I love it. I love it. Well, we do miss, oh my goodness, we do miss Illuminati's. I mean, there's just so many pizza places. I mean, you go anywhere outside of Chicago and you're like, this is not pizza. This is not pizza.
Unless you go to New York, where they promise they've got better pizza than we do. And I think in part of the, I think I agree with them, actually. Bottom line, I shouldn't say that as a Chicagoan, but Chicago, I do think it's the best dining city in America. So I will say that, New York included.
I love it. Well, hey, just so bring up our listeners a little bit more up to speed. Why don't you give them a little bit of your story, kind of dive into who you are, what you do, and tell us more about that.
Absolutely. We'll keep it very brief. So the name of my company is Steve Multer Corporate Storytelling. I started in 1997, incorporated in 1998. My first big client was Tivoli Systems right after they'd been purchased by IBM. So I came into this field as a corporate storyteller for major brands very accidentally and very rapidly. I was incredibly lucky that I started with a large brand. And I didn't even really know what I was doing at the time. I was a full-time actor. And somebody had come to me and said, we think you would be good at speaking on behalf of corporations. And I said, well, what is that? I don't even understand what that means or what the point and purpose would be. But I kept my head down. I happened to have some brilliant mentors, and I recognized that right out of the gate, that I was gifted with these remarkable voices, remarkable spirits who really loved this idea of how do we build up a brand while at the same time creating value for an individual? Because what are corporations made up of? Large quantities of individual humans. And I learned very rapidly that that was the trick. to winning successful communication. So I started working for Tivoli Systems. I started to add other major brands as I went. Cisco was one of my next ones. I am still one of the primary faces and voices for Cisco to this day. It's been 27 years that I've been
Huh.
lucky enough to represent the brand. But then other companies rolled in quickly: HP, Siemens, Bayer, Heidelberg in the print and graphics sector, Sikorsky in the aeronautics division, Lufthansa as well. And as I continued adding these different clients, I started to realize that I could help them with their messaging strategies as
Mm.
well. I could dig deep with their marketing teams, I could go in with their sales leadership, and I could help them to get back to the root of what their brand really meant to their marketplace and help them start to set the product pitches a bit aside and start to add in more of why the brand mattered to
Wow.
humans, why it created a connection with people. And the more I did it, the more excited I became. I was able to add and add and add to the business. And here we are, 27 years later, and I feel incredibly blessed to do what I do. And it's a gift every day, and I learn so much from my clients and from fellow speakers like you, Jason, all the time. So I love what I do. It's a delight.
My goodness, that's amazing. With some of your clients, so you've worked with them over the years, do you primarily, is it consulting? Is it, in their company, doing stuff? Is it at their events? I'm just curious about that.
Yes, is the answer to your question. So inevitably, when it's a new brand, I'm very much a word of mouth company myself. I've been working with
Yeah.
so many of these companies for so long because I've luckily been able to find ways not only to create value, but also to create great relationships with them. And as we know, that really is the key to great storytelling. It's
Mm.
relationship building. I don't need to tell any of your listeners that because everybody knows that. But it has morphed over the years into a combination of content strategy. And typically, the way I get in the door with the content strategy is we get a new CMO walking in the door, or we get a new leadership on the sales team, and they say, you know what, the way we've been doing things, we're either fairly stagnant, we're not showing the growth that we need to, we find that we've got too much attrition walking away from the company. We're not scaling in the way that we need to scale, and we need to find a new way to revitalize the messaging. You know what? Why don't we work with Steve? Because Steve has spoken on our behalf around the world for many, many moons. Why don't we ask him what people do and don't respond to? And we really go to the mattresses on this. We
Mm.
go directly to customers, we go to partners. My favorite people to talk to are partners. So rather than working with somebody inside the company and saying, okay, what do you think we should be saying? I love to set everybody in the company that I'm working with completely to the side and say, guys, hold back for a minute. I want to bring in partners and I want to bring in customers because what they say about us, that's the reality of our brand, not what
Wow.
we think of ourselves. It's what others
Wow.
think. It is on the human side as well, right? And you talk about this frequently, that becoming a better communicator doesn't just serve you in the business sense, it serves you personally as well.
Yeah.
When you want to evaluate yourself and your world, measure yourself by the people who want you in their company.
True.
Meaning not company brand, but want to sit around a fire with you and have a beer and share that hot dog at the ball game or what have you. If you
Yep.
look around and you say, man, my friends are really good people. They're wonderful humans. They're intelligent. They're fun. They're funny. They're involved. They're curious. They're just good people and they want me as their friend. That's probably the best measurement of you as a human. I think brands, corporations work the same way. What brands want to be in your company? And if those brands are great, you know you're doing well. And if you look around at your customers and you say, I don't know that they really represent us, you're probably not representing your brand correctly. So all the speaking I do is on one side. The marketing strategy that I do goes to what I just explained right there. I hope that made sense and
Absolutely.
was insightful.
Absolutely. Wow. That is powerful and really exciting. I love the analogy of sitting around with your company, with your friends and your relationships and how powerful that can be with the corporate. So in your book, nothing gets sold until the story gets told, which what a great title. I mean, my goodness,
It's
just amazing.
long, but at least it's catchy, right?
That's right. I love that and the power of story and how important. But you really do focus on, so much of what you've done with corporate storytelling. What are, you know, kind of the key takeaways when someone picks up the book? I don't want to give away too much stuff because they need to go buy your book, but how can their messaging have a lasting impact when, as they read your book and kind of go to town to make sure their message is powerful?
Oh, fantastic question. Thank you for asking that. So, everything within the book and everything that I do within my organization is built on three core pillars. They're the pillars of value, passion, and connection. When we
Mm.
add those three aspects to every level of our communication, we're going to win. We can't help but win because they're the three
Yeah.
things that our audience is searching for. So, the core fundamental of everything that I do comes down to a quote that I give to everybody I ever work with or talk with. And I always say, this is my mantra, it should be yours too. Don't tell them what you want to tell them what they want to hear. When you speak
Mhm.
for the benefit of other people over speaking for the benefit of yourself, you are going to win. Because what do humans care about most? Number one, right? It's the whiff 'em with it factor that we talk
Yep.
about in branding and marketing all the time. You always want to speak for the benefit of other people. And I always say that public speaking, communication in general, is a service profession.
Mhm.
You were a pastor, you get this. When you speak for the benefit of others, for the success of others, for the enlightenment, the empowerment, the uplifting of other people, instead of speaking for your own needs, you cannot help but succeed. And this is what the book does. So on every page, I wanted to make sure that I didn't just give a method of getting to that empowerment of other people, but I also showed people exactly how to get it done so there's no guesswork involved. So
Right.
throughout, it is how to create value for others, how to share your passion in a way that inspires passion in other people, and how to create a human connection that then extends out to your brand, your product, your solutions, and your team. And every page of the book hits either value, passion, connection, or a combination of the three and how to apply them.
So good. I was with a corporate client recently, Flagstar Bank, and we're doing a corporate
Hey, they
training
hold my
on.
mortgage.
Oh,
Say hello to them next time. They're my mortgage holder in
all
Arizona. Yeah.
right. All right.
Hmm.
Well, well, we were taking them
Amazing.
through our healthy communication skills training, this one-on-one, how do we succeed with our clients? And they said, for years, we've done the technology training great. Our people know the right words to say when they're selling, but we just haven't done a good job with that human connection.
Mm.
And in this day and age of more AI, more chat GPT, more of all this kind of stuff, that human connection, I think, is going to be more and more important. And so leaders have to lean into that. I would gather you're seeing that and experiencing that in the companies you work with.
It's the core differentiator, Jason. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. This will be how we create that division point between anything that is ML based and anything that is true human connection. AI is becoming brilliant, but we can't kid ourselves. Anybody who's terrified of AI, I always want to say, don't be so terrified yet. Chuck
Right.
Robbins, the chair and CEO of Cisco, he always says, let AI do the dumb stuff so the smart stuff can be done by a human being. And this is really what we've seen up until this
That's
point. All of
good.
our fear of the robots, to this date, the robots do those repetitive, redundant tasks that don't tend to take a lot of creativity or a lot of deep knowledge because they can do it based on historical performance. The human connection, AI can't do it yet. It can learn and then repeat what another human being does to a degree. But you can tell when it comes to communication, when somebody is reading a script that was produced by AI, we can see it from a mile and a half away. Every person who is listening right now, it's so clear that the human never went back and looked at what the AI created in order to
Yep.
personalize it. So that will create the differentiation. You've hit it.
Yep. Oh, and that, I'm laughing so hard because there's, so many times you read something on LinkedIn and you're like, yeah, that was,
Mm-hmm.
you know, AI did a doozy on that one.
Bot much? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, I love it. That human connection part. You tell a story about meeting a pastor on an airplane. Would love to, share that story with our listeners because it's just so powerful.
A great connection there to you as well. So this was about, I want to say 2 years ago. So I'm on a flight to Las Vegas to MC a corporate conference, and I'm sitting next to a guy, and we just start chit chatting. And he says, "Okay, what do you do?" And I explain to him what I do, and his eyes are sort of getting wider and wider as I'm saying, "I speak on behalf of corporations. I'm
Mm,
up in front of audiences on a weekly basis, sometimes even on a daily basis when things are tight." And I am telling the stories, the deep stories of the brands and the meaning that they create for the marketplace. And he goes silent for a couple of minutes, a guy named Eric. And it turns out that this guy is now a pastor in the Eastern Hemisphere. And the backup of the story is back in his early 20s, he had always wanted to be a pastor. But now he's 60, what is he, 62, 63 years old at the time that I met him. But back in his 20s, he really wanted to be a pastor. He felt the calling, he felt that this was something vital to him, but he didn't do it. And the reason he didn't do it was something called FNE. And I don't know how often you've talked about that here on the broadcast. It's a concept that comes out of Frontiers in Human Neuroscience. It was a 2014 study
Mm.
that talked about glossophobia, fear of public speaking,
Yep.
being based, which is, of course, as we know, the most widespread fear, being based on something called FNE, which is just the acronym for fear of negative evaluation. And the concept behind glossophobia is fear of judgment from or negative evaluation by others. And
Wow.
it's what keeps us from going out and telling our stories. And Eric in his 20s was just riddled with FNE. So what does he do? He says, well, I'm not going to be a pastor. I'm not going to do that. I am going to go into hard sciences. He ends up in California working on the space shuttle. He ends up working. I mean, this guy was brilliant. He was remarkable. He worked on the International Space Station. He ends up having 4 kids. He builds a fantastic life. And then he's around his mid to late 50s and he's traveling to Alaska and he sits next to another pastor. And he tells his story to the pastor, and the guy says, you have to start doing what your initial calling was. You're not serving your heart. And by not serving your heart, you're not serving the hearts of other people. You've got to do what makes most sense to you. And the guy says, fine, I'm going to face my fears. And he goes back home to his church in Southern California, and they say there is this leadership position available, but it requires you working basically mostly in the Russian area down through the Eastern Europe into the stands in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Tajikistan, uh, Turkmenistan, and he
Wow.
now leads
Wow.
a, a church that runs through, I think, 34 countries at this particular point, and all he does is speak. He got over the FNE, and the way that he did that was he started to realize what you talk about all the time, Jason. I keep judging myself for whether or
Mm.
not my story has value to other people. I continue to question whether I'm funny enough, interesting enough, engaging enough, whether my stories have enough meaning. And he said that pastor that I sat next to on the plane is the guy who told me, stop worrying about all of that nonsense. Go and serve other people with your communication.
Wow.
Build other people up. And by doing that, you develop the power of your own personal story. Your story takes on meaning. And this was, I love this. That's a very long version of my story with Eric, but it was so emotional for me on that 4 hour
Wow.
flight out to Vegas that I thought, thank heavens you did discover the value of your own story. It was always there. You squandered it for 4 decades.
Wow.
You lost 4 decades of great communication by not trusting yourself. Tell the story that's most meaningful to you. Other people will not only gain value for it, they will be grateful for it. You will make friends as well as acolytes, and you'll lift others up to be able to tell their own stories as well. So that's my Eric Pastor story.
Goodness.
I love it to this day. He's amazing.
Goodness. So powerful. I talk with leaders all the time who say things either like, well, I can't get up and speak in public because I have nothing good to say, or I don't have stories to share like you do. Nothing exciting happens to me. And it's hogwash. Every single human being on the planet has these amazing stories. And, if they can get over the FNE, I mean, it's just that just nailed it right on the head. Like, it's powerful.
Absolutely, it's so true. It's so true. I'll share one more story with you, only
Yep.
because I absolutely love that aspect of what it is that we do. A story that I talk about all the time. A guy named Yuri Hassan, and if you haven't watched Yuri Hassan's TED Talk from 2016, go and track it down right now. But Yuri Hassan runs the Hassan Laboratory at Princeton,
Mhm.
and he did a fantastic study on experience based chemical synchronization, what he called brain coupling at the time. And his talk is called "This Is Your Brain on Communication," and he's wonderful. But it's this idea that we could get others to experience something that we ourselves have experienced based around shared narratives. That there are certain things that all of us as human beings do on a daily basis that create recognizable stories. So, what do we
Hmm.
all do? We all go grocery shopping. We get into relationships. We experience love. We experience loss. We do our laundry. We clean our house. We drive our vehicle. We have our jobs. We look for a paycheck. All of these things that we all do mean that every time you walk into a room and communicate with somebody else, whether it's one person or a group of 10,000 people in an arena sitting in front of you, you already share lots of things in common with those people that you can build stories around that will bring them to you and you to them and create a level playing field and a
Mm,
playing field of connection. And this is where getting over the FNE, trusting your own personal story, really comes to power, because we always go into it thinking, I've got to prove something. I've got to
right.
prove to the people I'm talking to that I'm smarter than they are, that I know more than they do, that I'm funnier, more compelling, more intelligent. No, none of that. You can walk in the room saying, you are all smarter than me. You all know more than I do. Why
Yep.
do I have the microphone? Why is the spotlight on me? Because I want to share what I know and what I believe in hopes of making you better at your job, more successful in front of your leadership, a happier person in general. I want to get you home earlier to your family on a Friday night so you don't have to work every weekend. What can I do to help and support you? That is what gets us past the FNE, and that's exactly what Yuri Hassan was talking about.
So powerful, so powerful. It's amazing when when you coach a speaker, a leader who's trying to get over some of that fear, and they're just so I mean, everything is just attacking them, the nerves and their stomachs turning, and I can't get up in front. And if we can just help them go, wait a minute, you're putting the focus on the wrong place here. Just think about your audience. How can you help them succeed? How are you going to provide content that are going to change their lives, help them make great decisions? It really does start to shift because you're taking that focus out. Yeah, we're always going to have butterflies or we're going to have,
Sure.
different things like that. But if you, totally think through, it's when I was 18 years old and read How to Win Friends and Influence People for the first time. I was like, wait a minute. This is crazy. It's still, that principle still
Talk about
holds true.
others.
Yeah. It's
What a
not all about
concept,
me.
right?
How about that?
No. I love to tell people when I'm coaching them that not only is the fear of negative evaluation not worth focusing on, because again, if you just go to serve people, how can you go wrong? I'm here to
Right.
help you, not to prove that I'm better than you in any way. Just how can I help you? How can I be of service to you? But the other side is that the FNE is a complete falsehood that we make up, and we learn it from a very young age. And I won't go into the detail on that. That would be a different talk, and you know it as well as I do. But I always say that not only is FNE not really a thing, most human beings don't have time to negatively evaluate others. They're too busy negatively evaluating themselves. They're too busy judging
Yep.
themselves. And
Yep.
when you get up and speak, they're just grateful that it's you up there and not them.
Yep.
All the pressure's on you. Great. I can just sit back and I can listen to what you have to say. And I can say, great, create
Yep.
value for me.
Yep.
Tell me what's going to help me. That's all there is to it. There is nothing to fear.
Oof.
But of course,
So
that's easier in speech than it is in actuality.
that's right. Why do you think more companies, more corporations, when they do share their story, either they make the story all about themselves or why do you think that sometimes they forget about, trying to weave their story in with their customers or their clients? Or, sometimes like you'll see their story maybe of like an old school company. We've been around 100 years and we've made, okay, that's exciting. But what about, your customers' problems? Like, what do you solve for them? What do you think are some of the common storytelling mistakes that companies, corporations use?
Oh man, Jason, you could not have hit the better question if you tried. And again, this is what you deal with all the time as well. So number one, we know what is the foundational issue. And the foundational issue is bottom lines and profits. If you've got to turn quarter over quarter profits and you've got to prove to your board and to shareholders that you're a company of value, everything comes down to the sale. We start looking at human beings as wallets
Yep.
instead of as fellow travelers sitting in front of us, people with their own personal wants, needs, desires, hopes. If we can speak to that, we create long term growth. If we speak to the sale, we might win an individual contract, but we're not winning any extended relationship beyond that contract. So ultimately, I think that's the foundational problem. People resort to the sale, A, because they're being forced to by their leadership.
Mhm.
All the leadership cares about is numbers
Yep.
fundamentally. And
Yep.
then B, it's because the easiest thing to trust is a set of metrics and statistics. If you can drop KPIs in front of your audience and you can use that as your talking point, you don't have to do any personal work. You don't have to expose your soft white underbelly to them.
Yep.
You don't have to take any risks. You don't have to tell them about personally what makes you tick and what's going on in your brain and your heart and your soul in a way that has so much more meaning for them, just rely on the numbers. Regurgitate what's on your website, what's in your white paper, your mission statement,
Yep.
whatever it happens to be. Here's the brochure. Allow me to stand up in front of you and speak the contents of my brochure. And of course, what the audience ends up saying is, well, what do I need you for? I can read the contents of your brochure on my own time and dime. I don't need to travel to listen to you. I
Yep.
don't need to set my life aside to listen to you. I can learn all this stuff on my own. What do you bring to the conversation personally that I can't get from any document or I can't get online? That is where the gold lies in communication. And companies tend to forget this. And you mentioned before, we've been around for 100 years, right? It's the biggest thing. When I work with a startup, startups are amazing. I got four primary people on the startup. And then I've got another four key investors. I've got eight people total to work with. And man, their passion is on display every
Mm.
minute of the day because they're the only people to tell the story. There's nobody out there to do it for them. They're so in it. Now we go 35 years down the line, and the people who started the company are long gone. They've left the organization, and the people now running it are just concerned with the dollar signs, just concerned with the bottom line, and they forgot why the company was built, what problem it was meant to solve, for whom, and why it mattered so much to them. And if we, as trainers, as coaches, as leaders, can help them get back to what fundamentally makes that brand tick, why they cared, and start to add that story back into the bottom line story, we get a winning set of communications, a winning set of marketing tools. But if we continue to just talk money, it's only a matter of time before somebody else takes over because somebody will always do it cheaper, better, smarter, faster. They'll ship those jobs overseas. They will cut corners and they'll come in cheaper. And all of a sudden you end up with a Walmart economy. And this is a lot of where we end up is
Yep.
cheaper wins and boutique loses. And that's a
Yep.
real problem for many, many brands.
Wow. Wow. That is so powerful. For our speakers that are listening, folks who are trying to break in, one of the the best skills you can learn, and I would say probably for entrepreneurs and business owners as well, especially as they're trying to develop, is using the client that you're working with right now to kind of springboard to the next client.
Mm.
What are some of the you know uh, characteristics, or maybe it's a checklist that you try to do as you're working with a client, not keeping your eye on the next one, but just trying to do so well that it's like, okay, if this goes well, they'll talk to somebody else. Are there some things you can do to help that process, or do you let it happen naturally? I would love to pick
Mm.
your brain on that.
Ooh, what a great question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that before, Jason. That's a good one. When people ask me what the differentiation of my brand is, having been around again for 27 years and seen a decent amount of success with it, I never ever go to my knowledge or expertise. To me, they're
Yes.
almost secondary. So, for example, a great guitar player who goes to audition for a band, my perspective is, well, of course you're a great guitar player. If you weren't a great guitar player, you wouldn't be here auditioning. Just being a good guitar player, that's your foot in the door. That's just the way you got the audition slot to begin with. What I'm looking for, if I'm the rest of the band, is not how well you play the guitar. I expect you to be excellent. What else do you bring to the conversation? What do you bring to the stage show? What do you
Mm,
bring to the interaction and the engagement of all the people here in the room? That is where you truly shine.
yep.
And I think it's the same thing when we are working with a client, when we're working with a customer. They already expect us to be good
Mm,
at our jobs. Otherwise, we wouldn't get the job to begin with.
right.
But it's so much more. Same thing with an employee within your organization. If you think about the people that work for you or that work alongside you on your teams, you expect them to be good. Being good is not special. Knowing your job and doing it well is not special. It's
Mm,
the other things that you bring. It's when people look at you and say, I want that person on my team. I like how they make me feel. I
yep.
like the sense of brainstorm and energy that they bring to the table. I like that when I bounce ideas off of them, they don't just shoot them down, they build on them and expand them and make them even better. I like the fact that I walk away after one of our engagements saying, I'm looking forward to the next one because good things happen when I get together with this individual.
Yep.
When you look at your relationships with your clients, that is what they really want. And if all you're saying is, I made you more money, they're saying, well, yeah, that's why I paid you, not
Right.
why I'm going to hire you again.
So
So
good.
I would say that's the best way to expand your business
Yes.
model is be somebody who delights people, who serves people, who builds people up, and who makes people feel good about what they are doing. Do that, you become an indispensable member of their team, and they want to use you in more and more areas, and they
So
pass
good.
word along to others.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. It's so good. Oh, I love that. Okay. I just I didn't prep you with this question, but as I'm thinking about it,
Uh-oh.
I don't get to, well, I get to have lots of great interviews with amazing leaders, professional speakers, but especially a speaker like you who, have been on tons and tons of stages. I'd love if one comes to your mind, is there a mistake, a colossal mistake that like pops out? Because sometimes these are kind of helpful, especially like as I'm coaching, lots of young speakers who are getting into, their first couple gigs and they think it's going to go absolutely perfect and nothing's ever going to go wrong. And it's always helpful, right? To
Oh.
hear like
How long is your show, man? You want mistakes? I got more mistakes than I can ever begin to lay on you. Okay, so one of the things that I love about what you do, Jason, is you talk about clarity, you talk about structure and how incredibly important they are in creating connection with others. You talk about hook. So let's talk about one of, I'm not going to call it just because it's funnier. I'm not going to talk about my mistake. I'm going to talk about a mistake that one of my clients made. And I'm even going to call them out by name. So it's 1999, and I'm working for Philips Electronics. And this was a time, for those of you who are not anywhere near as ancient as I am, this was a time when voice to text was starting to become a really powerful thing. Corporations had voice to text, but individual users really didn't. And there were some big, uh, um, really big companies out there at the time. Dragon was one of the first early ones. Lernout and Halsey was one, for those of you who might remember that brand. But Philips said, we want to get into the voice to text business. And back then, there was a big event called Comdex. And if anybody ever attended Comdex, it was massive. It was a week-long show. It brought in 200 and some odd
oh,
thousand people. It was just a chaos event. It died back in 2003, I think is when they ended. But I'm working for Philips Electronics, and I'm a young cop, and I'm a moron, and I don't know what I'm doing. And Philips says, we are going to demo this voice to text live on the show floor. And you're going to be the one to do it. I said, great. So I've got like 300 people at a time in front of me. And I have one of these little handheld things, and I'm speaking it, and it's coming up live on the massive screen behind me, and it is making mistake after mistake
oh.
after mistake. First of all, it's a wrong environment. It's so noisy and chaotic, and people are screaming and yelling, and there's music, and they're,
Yep.
and so it's picking that up as well as my voice. So I am ending up I'm dictating a letter to my mom. I think I was saying, "Hey, mom, I'm here in Las Vegas. We're at Comdex. I'm with Philip. We're having a great time." And last night for dinner, I went out and I had somebody yell out, "What did I have for dinner last night?" Okay, I had lobster and I had pizza. Okay, good. So I had lobster and I had pizza, and up on the screen, swear words are popping up, and I'm not going to
Oh.
repeat those swear words right now, but it's going live, and my audience is dying. They're howling in front of me and because it's just utterly inappropriate and it's wrong, and I have to figure out a way to cover this. But what was amazing was we were
Oh.
selling this software for $99. It's a $99 box. We sold out of every one that they brought, even with the mistakes going on up on the board. And it was such a good early lesson for me. They
Love
weren't
it.
buying the software because it was perfect. They were buying the software because we were all having fun together and because it was honest and in the moment. We were showing them we are willing to, again, expose our soft white
Yep.
underbelly, expose all of our errors and our failures as a brand, and we're going to have fun with you. And people were like, yeah, fine, give it to me. I know, I see what's going on around. So is this a failure? Total failure, but it worked. And it
Yep.
worked because we were willing to play and have a good time with the people in front of us. We weren't taking ourselves so seriously that we were focused entirely on perfection. We were willing to show the imperfection. And a different type of speaker might have caved
Mm.
under the loss. And instead, it was just too much fun and we had a ball with it. And even the Philips people, the people responsible for the product, who could have been sitting there saying, I'm about to lose my job in real time, right
Yep.
here in 1999 in this event. Instead, they were laughing along with the rest of the audience. They thought it was hysterical, and it worked. So even if failure can become a success, if you will be honest, stay in the moment, stay connected to your audience, have a good time with them, your story, even if it's not the best story in the world, or even if it's a fail story, you can still have a good time with it and turn it to a net positive.
Oh,
That's the one that popped to my mind.
I love that. So powerful. I mean, in those stories too, they bring hope to people, right? Because they're like,
What
okay.
about you? Can you share one with me? Do we have time for you to do that? That one that pops to your mind?
Oh my goodness.
Just utter failure, disaster. I want like total disaster time from you. I
um,
put you on the spot. Or if you don't want to give it to me now, promise me that you'll do a future episode where you'll say, Steve challenged me to tell you when it was a failure that turned into a success, and I want to hear a future episode of you doing that.
no, I can think of one. I could do that as well. But I
Okay.
was I was speaking at a student event, and there was probably 3,000 to 4,000 teenagers in the room. So it was like a little
Already.
half
My heart is
bowl.
fluttering already.
Yeah.
3,000 to 4,000 teenagers in one space. Help me now.
Yeah. So it was quite a bit. And so, they had never met me before, so I told one of my, signature stories. This one happened to be about a my best friend's mom vacuuming up their pet bird. And so, it's a true
I've
story.
heard the story. I love this story.
I
I've
mean,
heard you tell the story.
it's happened to, a bunch of people. And
Chippy, chirpy,
Chippy, yep.
Chippy. I remember this Chippy story. I love that story.
Yep.
It's brilliant. Chippy's covered in toenails, I think you said, and
Yeah,
goop
you
and
did hear
and,
it.
and, and brilliant. Love it.
Wow, look at that. Yep. So, at the very end of the talk, I'm supposed to give some concrete directions. The program manager said, "Hey, you need to give them directions so at the end they can make a." It was like a pledge night, and they had to make a decision, and so they had to like go over to a red barrel and put their like note card in it or something. Well, my hearing has been going for ever since my young 20s rock band days. And so now,
Uh,
even the last 15 years, my hearing is just not. So the room was loud. The program manager's telling me this right before I'm walking on stage. I'm like, this probably should have been information we went over earlier. And so I hear tell the kids who want to make a decision to bring their cards up onto the stage. And so I'm like, okay, okay. So I get done and it's an emotional time. They're making a decision. And I said, if you want to make that decision, this is going to be one of those moments that you remember the rest of your life. Bring your card up to the stage and put it on the middle of the stage. So thousands of kids, hundreds of kids, and then into 1,000 or two start to move towards the stage and they start to come onto the stage. So at any given moment, I mean, there's like 50, 80, 100, 120. And at this point, like it's in one of those halls, with the union workers because they have to set everything up. People are like running. They're like, everybody off the stage, get off the stage. I I
oh
had
my
messed up that
word.
like now I've misspoke a lot. I've said things I probably shouldn't have, all of that kind of stuff. But that was the one where I was like, oh man, that could have like stage collapsing, lawsuits. I'm like, oh boy, that was
You should have body surfed, man. You should have done like if everybody stopped right there. You should have done a stage dive and let them just like
yes,
carry you around the room. Oh my
yes,
word!
absolutely.
Bring your card to the stage. I'm going to keep that one in mind next time somebody says, "Ask everybody to come forward." No, Jason told me do not do that. It's a bad plan.
Yep, that was it. That was it. So but Steve, this conversation has been so amazing. I furiously took notes. I love to take notes during the podcast episode just because it helps me remember and trigger some things. And so I could literally go on. I mean, we could probably do
Oh,
part two, part three, part four, but I can't wait to share your book and your resources with our community, our listeners. Before I do that, though, we're building this online communication library for leaders to go access and
mm.
find new material, new resources that may encourage them. So I'd love to ask you, do you have a favorite speaker? Is there someone that every time you listen to them, boy, they check off every one of your boxes, they fill you up, and you've got to refer them or recommend them to someone else? Is there someone in that category for you?
Can I give you two? Because two
Absolutely.
are popping in my mind right now. All right. First of all, let's get in Seth Madison. Seth,
Mm.
Matt, Mattison. Seth is such a remarkable keynote speaker and storyteller. First of all, his passion rivals anybody's passion I've ever seen in my life. And it
Mm.
is so honest. It is so genuine. It is so authentic. But his energy and his passion will make you want to be better at anything you do, whatever it
Oh,
happens to do. So please track him down. And if you're in a position as a leader to bring him to your event, Seth is a remarkable guy. He's incredible. So look him up.
I love that.
He's got a brand new talk that he's been working around the circuit called Made with Love, and he's always been good, but Made with Love is absolutely remarkable because it really exposes the difference between any product, solution, service, message, brand, and you can tell whether it is being delivered with love, with care, if love is what is behind it, or if marketing is what's behind it, and branding is what's behind it, and the difference is stark. And he really does
Mm.
a beautiful job of painting the difference between things that are made with love and things that are made to make money, and
Wow.
why one connects with us and demands our attention and the other ultimately doesn't. So he's remarkable. The other person, you and I talked about this before we started rolling here, and that is Terry O'Reilly, who
Mm.
hosts my favorite podcast in the world, second only to Jason Rates.
Ah,
And I mean, it's I come on, we know who we're talking to here. But if you don't know Terry yet, his podcast is called Under the Influence. And he is first of all, he was a major radio storyteller, brander for advertising for many, many years. He could put together, up in Canada, he could put together a 30-second spot called Pirate Radio was the name of his company. And he did just incredible work when he was in his career. He's retired now. Now he's one of the great advertising historians in the world. And to listen to him speak on an aspect of advertising and marketing in terms of what creates meaning for people and what doesn't, what lands and what misses the target. I learn so much from Terry so quickly every time I listen to him. And his book, which is called This I Know,
mm.
is definitely a must read for everybody who is interested in building up your sense of marketing leadership and being a thought leader within the brand messaging and strategic messaging category. Terry is a rock star of epic
Love that.
proportions, and he has all my love.
Love that. And then I know you just mentioned a book, but is there a book that you would recommend? Boy, every leader, you got to make sure you read this. It's got to be on your shelf. Go back and forth to it.
Absolutely. So this I know to me is my starter. Start with Terry
Yep.
O'Reilly's This I Know. It's an easy read. It's a fun read, but that's my number one go-to book. It's the book that I pull out again and again and again. Now there are certain people who, absolutely. If you look at Start with Why, if you look at what Cynic is creating, Donald Miller's an interesting one. You brought up Donald as well, and he does great work. If you go back to the work of Robert Dilts, everything that he has done has been fantastic. In some ways, one of the worst reads in history, but one of the best messaging in history, is to go and look at what was happening with Barbara Minto when she put
Mm.
out the pyramid principle. It's one of the worst reads I've ever had. It is boring. It is dull beyond dull writing that was being done when she was working with McKinsey. But the bottom line message, if you can get past the dull writing to how to structure a talk intelligently using the pyramid principle, it's just remarkably beneficial and valuable to creating the structure that you talk about all the time, Jason.
Yep. Oh, it's so good. It's funny. Just yesterday, I interviewed a executive leadership coach from Australia, and she loves the pyramid principle. I mean, we talked all about it.
Sure.
We kind of dove into it, and and of course, we also talked about some of the wildlife that she's seen in Australia because that was fascinating.
Of course.
Spiders
Everything
the
will
size
kill
of
you. Isn't that what they
horses.
say?
Yes.
And by the way, for a lot of people who don't know Minto's writing, and again, it's a slog, but my word, the power of it is really remarkable if you can get through the slog. So it's not just pyramid principle. She was also the mother of the MECE principle, and a lot of people don't know the MECE principle, MECE, which stands for mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Which,
Wow.
when you're looking at the structure of a great story, it's the idea that instead of jumping around from idea to idea to idea to idea, your audience will follow you through if you give them one core idea and then you focus exclusively on that concept or that idea and you exhaust every aspect of that idea before moving on
Ooh,
to the next idea within your storytelling. So MECE
so
principle
good.
is another great one created by Barbara Minto and well worth tracking.
Well, I'm probably going to have to retitle the podcast episode right now because I feel like you've given our listeners a communication masterclass. So this has been
Amazing.
so powerful. Thank you. Where can we send our listeners, people in our community, to find you online? Where's the best place to go?
So glad that you asked that and grateful that you asked that. So if you want the book, available in every format through anything, and again, it's called Nothing Gets Sold Until the Story Gets Told, Value, Passion, and Connection through Corporate Storytelling. And then if you want to find me, I'm super easy. Steve Multer Corporate Storytelling is the name of my company, and you can get to me by stevemulter.com or corporatestorytelling.com. You can track me down. Either one will get you there. Last thing I'll mention is a freebie for any one of your listeners who wants to
Yes.
go and grab that. I've created a really cool and really clear e-guide called 5 Paths to Passionate Storytelling. If you want to pick that up, go to corporatestorytelling.com/guide and then put in the code sold told 23, all one word, all lowercase, sold told 23. So you can grab that e-guide. If you want to sign up for my Tuesday tips and tricks newsletter, you're welcome to do that as well. But that guide is 5 ways that you can become a better storyteller for yourself or for your brand right now, regardless of your experience, your knowledge, your job title, your socioeconomic status, your location. 5 things you can do today to become a better and more passionate storyteller and raise yourself and your brand up. So go grab that.
Absolute gold. Just gold. Thank you for doing that for our community. And then we're going to put that in our community Facebook group, share it on all our socials, put it in the email. And Steve, I can't thank you enough for this. This has been, delightful. And buckets of gratitude over here. So thank you very much.
So kind of you, Jason. Total pleasure. Absolutely loved being with you and being with all of your listeners. And hopefully we've created some great value together. And I look forward to more of it, man. You're a delight and you're brilliant at what you do. So thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Speak with People podcast. We hope that you were encouraged. We hope that you were inspired and challenged to improve your communication skills. I want to thank you again for being a part of the Speak with People podcast community. Make sure you don't miss out on being a part of the Speak with People Facebook community group. Just head to Facebook, type in Speak with People, scroll down and join our community because every single day we're encouraging each other, we're helping each other to improve our communication skills. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode.